This is a seriously underrated sci-fi masterpiece, the absolute peak of classic hard sci-fi. You could even say it built the foundation for modern sci-fi world building. It packed in almost every wild concept imaginable and inspired countless works that followed. So, what makes it such a timeless classic? In 1928, the US military dug up a bizarre ring on the Giza Plateau in Egypt. Nearly 7 meters across, it was forged entirely from an unknown metal. The ring was divided into equal sections, densely covered in symbols that didn't belong to any known civilization. Nearby, they also found a pendant made of the exact same metal, featuring a single, staring eye right in the center. At first, people assumed it was just a burial trinket for some pharaoh, but carbon dating proved it was way older than any pyramid. There's no way metalwork this precise could have existed back then. So, what the hell was this ring? And who buried it on Earth thousands of years ago? Fast forward to 1994. Meet Jackson, a linguist obsessed with ancient texts. But his theories were so out there that nobody ever showed up to his lectures. One day, an older woman named Catherine offered him a job translating ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Jackson could tell instantly she was government. Figuring they'd made a massive new discovery, he jumped at the chance. A few days later, Jackson was brought to a military base in Colorado. Right in the main hall sat a massive circular stone tablet. It was dug up in Egypt alongside that mysterious ring, carved with texts and symbols no one had ever seen. The base's linguists had already taken a crack at it, but Jackson knew with one glance they'd botched the translation. After rearranging the symbols, he decoded the true message. The supreme sun god will forever seal and bury this, the gateway to the stars. It sounded like some primitive religious belief. Jackson didn't get why the military cared so much about a 5,000-year-old relic. Colonel O'Neill set him straight. Dating showed this thing was actually tens of thousands of years old, long before ancient Egypt even existed. That's why the military was sweating it. Jackson's only job? Decipher the tablet. 2 weeks flew by. Jackson had torn through every cuneiform and prehistoric record available, but still couldn't crack the whole tablet. Just as he was hitting a brick wall, he happened to glance at a newspaper on a guard's desk showing a star chart of Orion. He immediately compared it to the tablet. An exact match. Suddenly, it clicked. These weren't words. They were star charts. A few days later, Jackson briefed the top brass. The symbols on the outer ring were actually celestial coordinates, marking 7 specific locations. In 3D space, you only need 6 points to lock onto a destination. The 7th point is your origin. Connect them, and you've got a clear flight path. The scholars in the room pushed back, saying they only found 6 coordinates on the stone. Jackson corrected them. The 7th point wasn't on the outer ring. It was at the bottom. It showed 2 figures sitting beside a pyramid, with a line shooting out from the top. That was the final symbol. Catherine was thrilled. She definitely hired the right guy. Since the final coordinate was locked in, it was time to show him the real deal. Massive doors slowly pulled apart, revealing a metal ring nearly 7 meters wide in the center of the room. This was the Stargate, and that stone tablet was its instruction manual. For 66 years, the military had been trying to figure out how to turn it on. They needed Jackson to finally make sense of it. The crew immediately powered up the machine. The ring worked like a giant combo lock, dialing in the symbols one by one. As they pumped energy into it and locked in all 7 coordinates, the whole room started shaking. With the final click, a rippling, watery barrier materialized in the center. The Stargate was open. They sent a probe equipped with a tracker straight through. The second it crossed the threshold, its signal pinged from somewhere deep in the Kalium galaxy. It was official. They had a localized wormhole sitting right in front of them. Seconds later, the signal died, and the gate slammed shut. But the footage showed an identical ring on the other side, just with slightly different symbols. Plus, the oxygen, pressure, and temperature were a dead match for Earth, meaning there could be intelligent life over there. The military needed boots on the ground, fast. Jackson volunteered to tag along, figure out the situation, and dial them back home. Since the basic mechanics of both gates were the same, the general felt good about sending his best linguist, and Green lit the mission. Before they shipped out, Catherine handed Jackson her lucky pendant, the one dug up with the gate. Geared up and ready, Jackson, Colonel O'Neill, and 5 soldiers stepped into the portal. The trip only took seconds, but to them, it felt like a lifetime. They stumbled out into a pitch-black room. Luckily, it was a tight space, and they quickly found the exit. Stepping outside, they realized they had been teleported straight inside a pyramid, surrounded by an endless sea of sand. Jackson put 2 and 2 together. The Egyptian pyramids were built by aliens. The colonel wanted to head straight back and report to command, but Jackson dropped a bombshell. They couldn't. He could read the symbols, but he didn't know the right sequence to dial home. They had to find a local stone tablet to get the coordinates. The soldiers were pissed. For all they knew, the tablet was buried under 100 feet of sand. They were officially stranded. With no choice, they set up camp. Morale was rock bottom until Jackson spotted some fresh footprints in the dunes. All 7 of his guys were at camp, so they weren't alone. Following the tracks, he found an alien camel wearing a harness. It was domesticated. Before he could process this, the colonel's squad caught up, spooking the beast. It bolted, dragging Jackson by a tangled rein deep into the desert. When the squad finally caught up, they couldn't believe their eyes. A massive group of aliens were hard at work. They looked exactly like us, just speaking gibberish. As the team's linguist, Jackson stepped up. But before he could even say a word, the locals spotted his pendant and instantly dropped to their knees. The tribal chief hurried over. They couldn't communicate, but the sheer reverence made it clear. Jackson was a VIP. That evening, the team was led back to their walled city. The stone buildings proved these people lived a highly primitive life. Hanging in the town square was a massive metal disc matching Jackson's pendant, the Eye of Ra, the Egyptian sun god. These people thought Jackson was his divine messenger. Suddenly, warning horns blared, and the massive city gates started closing. The colonel, sensing a trap, grabbed a hostage and drew his weapon, demanding to be let out. The chief's son quickly led him up to the wall to clear things up. A brutal sandstorm was rolling in. They were just locking down to survive. Sadly, the soldiers left at base camp weren't so lucky. The storm shredded their setup, forcing them to take cover inside the pyramid. That night, the chief threw a feast, serving up some mystery meat. Jackson tried it tasted exactly like chicken. Looking up at the Eye of Ra, the colonel asked a good question. If they know symbols, do they know hieroglyphs? Jackson walked over and started sketching some characters in the dirt. But the chief panicked and wiped it away immediately. Writing was strictly forbidden. Before bed, the locals got Jackson cleaned up, and a beautiful girl walked into his room and started undressing. Jackson realized it was a hospitality thing, but he wasn't about to cross that line. He tried to politely walk her out, but when he opened the door, the chief was on his knees, terrified that Jackson had rejected his gift. To avoid causing a panic, Jackson awkwardly went back inside. He learned her name was Shara. Jackson drew a pyramid to show where he came from. Shara looked nervous. Writing was a massive taboo, but she eventually drew a circle over the pyramid. It was perfect hieroglyphic syntax. She knew how to write. Jackson begged her to show him where she learned it. Cut back to the pyramid. A colossal UFO suddenly hovered right over the structure. The soldiers inside braced themselves. They couldn't see it, but the heavy rumbling definitely wasn't a sandstorm. Suddenly, a dark figure dropped from the shadows, knocking them out one by one. Right before the last guy faded to black, he saw his attacker, a heavily armored warrior in a jackal mask. Who were these guys? Meanwhile, Shara led Jackson to a hidden cave covered in hieroglyphs. They did times have a written language. It had just been outlawed. Shara helped Jackson learn their dialect. It was a variation of ancient Egyptian, and he picked it up incredibly fast. Reading the walls, Jackson uncovered the dark truth. An alien calling himself Ra was dying. He scoured the universe for a way to cheat death until he found Earth tens of thousands of years ago. Ra realized he could possess human bodies to live forever. He crowned himself a god and used the Stargate to ship thousands of humans to this planet to mine a specific mineral, the exact stuff that powered all his tech. But Earth fought back, rebelled, and buried the Stargate. Terrified these slaves would get the same idea, Ra banned reading and writing completely. Right then, the team found the local stone tablet, the instruction manual to get home. But the 7th coordinate was totally eroded. They were still stuck. After the storm passed, the four headed back to the pyramid, only to find a massive spaceship parked on top. Dead radio silence from their base camp told the colonel everything he needed to know. Ambush. They snuck inside but were immediately pinned down. The guards fired lethal energy blasts from their wrists, killing 2 soldiers instantly. The colonel dragged Jackson into a side room to grab a secret weapon he'd smuggled from Earth, but the case was empty. A teleportation ring dropped from the ceiling, dropping 3 armed guards right in front of them. Outgunned, the colonel surrendered. They were dragged before Ra, who was surrounded by children. Like any good tyrant, Ra brainwashed kids early to turn them into fiercely loyal zealots. Guards hauled in the colonel's missing weapon, a literal nuclear bomb. With his cover blown, the colonel snapped. He disarmed a guard and opened fire. In the chaos, Jackson took a blast straight to the gut. Just as the colonel aimed at Ra, the brainwashed kids threw themselves in the line of fire. He hesitated for a split second, and the guards knocked him out. They tossed him in a flooded dungeon with his surviving men. They were sitting ducks. To punish the locals for helping the outsiders, Ra sent 2 fighters to bomb their city to dust. The chief wept over the bodies. But tragically, he didn't blame Ra, he blamed himself for taking the strangers in. That night, Jackson woke up inside a sarcophagus. His fatal gut wound was completely healed. This thing could literally raise the dead. Guards brought Jackson back to Ra. The alien mocked humanity for inventing nukes, but said they were about to pay for it. Ra was going to pack the nuke with his explosive alien ore, multiplying its yield by 100, and beam it straight back to Earth. He built human civilization, and now he was going to erase it. But first, a little public relations stunt. The next day, Ra gathered the masses. Jackson was standing up there wearing the sun god pendant, and the locals were starting to doubt their faith. Ra handed Jackson a weapon and ordered him to execute his friends. It was a loyalty test to prove Ra was the one true god. As Jackson stood over his friends, he caught a flash of light. It was the chief's son, signaling him with a lighter rocking stolen human firearms. Jackson had already told Shera the truth about their past and taught them they didn't have to be slaves. Led by Shera, the youth were ready to go to war. Jackson caught the hint, whipped around, and opened fire on Ra's guards. In the explosive chaos, the locals helped them break out. Once safe, Jackson finally confronted the colonel about the nuke. The colonel admitted his secret orders. If the planet was a threat, blow the Stargate to hell. But now, priority 1 was stopping Ra from nuking Earth. That night, the chief's son painted a mural of their victory. Jackson stared at it, the symbols. When he connected the dots on the pyramids, it formed the exact shape of the missing 7th coordinate. They finally had the dial-out code. The next day, a masked overseer came down to abuse the miners. But the colonel was hiding in the crowd. He caught the guy slipping, snatched his weapon, and put him down. The slaves fell to their knees in pure terror, expecting divine retribution. But Jackson just walked up and ripped off the overseer's mask. It was just a guy. No gods, no monsters, just men playing dress-up to keep them scared. Seeing this completely shattered the chief's worldview. Later, the slaves hauled a shipment of ore to the pyramid. The guards were paranoid, violently checking faces, but the colonel's squad was locked and loaded. The second they were spotted, they opened fire, dropping the guards. Ra heard the gunfire, locked down the pyramid, and ordered the nuke sent to Earth immediately. Knowing his playbook, the colonel, Jackson, and Shara rushed the Stargate room and found the bomb. The colonel armed it and set a 7-minute timer. Sure, they could just run home, but the only way to keep Earth permanently safe was to blow the gate to bits. Jackson had exactly 7 minutes to dial them out. Suddenly, a guard breached the room. Jackson dropped him, but a stray blast caught Shara. She went down hard. Jackson had fallen for this brave, kind girl, and he wasn't leaving without her. Spotting the teleportation rings, he scooped her up and beamed out to find the healing sarcophagus. The second they vanished, Ra's top enforcer strutted in. He and the Colonel threw down in a brutal, bare-knuckle brawl. Upstairs, Jackson tossed Shara into the sarcophagus, and she was instantly healed. But as they turned to leave, Ra was right behind them, packing a hand device that fired mind-melting energy waves. Just as Jackson was about to lose consciousness, the Colonel turned the tide downstairs. He smashed the teleport button on the enforcer's wrist. The heavy rings slammed down, cleanly decapitating the guy. Jackson and Shara were standing right in the beam. In a flash, they were teleported to safety, leaving Ra staring at a severed head. With less than 2 minutes on the bomb, there was no time to dial the gate. The Colonel tried to stop the clock, but Ra had rigged it. Once it started, it couldn't be stopped. Outside, the tribal chief led thousands of his people charging across the dunes, finally taking up arms to slaughter their oppressors. Seeing his empire fall, Ra powered up his ship to flee. With 30 seconds left, Jackson had a genius idea. He hit the teleport button on the dead enforcer's wrist and beamed the live nuke straight up into Ra's ship. Ra looked at the bomb, pure terror in his eyes. Seconds later, a massive explosion vaporized him and his ship into cosmic dust. In the aftermath, Jackson finally dialed the gate. The Colonel and his men walked back to Earth, but Jackson stayed behind. There were too many mysteries left to uncover here, and he had found the woman he loved. Leaving behind an Earth that never understood him, he finally found exactly where he belonged. And that's a wrap. Released in 1994, Stargate Times wasn't just a $200 million box office smash. It launched a massive 4-year franchise, with 3 TV shows and multiple movies. Calling it a sci-fi juggernaut is an understatement. By tying the mysteries of ancient Egypt into a gate that dials the stars, the movie flawlessly blends astronomy, geometry, and mythology. It's a brilliant hook that keeps you glued to the screen from start to finish.